More than 7,000 cases of new COVID infections reported in the city for the second consecutive day. President Xi Jinping arrives in Kazakhstan on his first overseas trip in more than 2 years. And the Queen's coffin taken to London ahead of next Monday's funeral. Welcome to TVB News. The city logged 7,579 COVID cases, around 360 more than yesterday. Imported cases accounted for 161 infections. Another 10 coronavirus patients have died as Aberdeen Technical School experienced an outbreak cluster which led to the evacuation of over 100 students. Taiwan's Christian Alliance Cheng Wing Ji College has also suspended all classes. Timothy Lee reports.
The city's schools reported 1,625 cases, with 38 schools needing to suspend classes. Aberdeen Technical School, which previously saw infections in 3 classes, reported 8 infected students today from classes 1C and 2A. 30 students were infected in total, including 26 who were residents of the school hostel. The Center for Health Protection believes the school hostel to be the origin of the outbreak. Its residents have been evacuated.
For the Aberdeen Technical School, there are 2 halls in the hostels, and there is a staircase between the 2 halls, and each hall has 1 toilet. We haven't found that they had held any major activities, but they would share washrooms, so maybe there's transmission there.
Taiwan's Christian Alliance Cheng Wing Ji College recorded cases from 16 of its classes, involving 39 students, 14 teachers, and school staff members. The school has temporarily suspended all classes. Caritas Medical Center reported that a 90-year-old female patient tested COVID positive when she left the hospital last Friday. Hospital authorities found 2 other patients who shared a room with her are now infected. One of them suffered from a separate health problem and is now in serious condition. 11 residents and 2 staff members across 8 care homes tested positive. A total of 80 care home residents now have to be quarantined. Meanwhile, 10 COVID patients, 8 men and 2 women aged between 72 and 99 have died. 4 of them were not triple jabbed. The 5th wave has claimed the lives of 9,617 people in the city. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Starting from November, quarantine hotel guests diagnosed with COVID will be able to choose to complete their isolation period on hotel premises. But some representatives in the hotel sector believe that the move will not offer improvement to businesses. Timothy Lee again.
Health authorities announced yesterday that from November, incoming travelers who are found to be infected with COVID while undergoing hotel quarantine can stay in the hotels without being transferred to designated isolation facilities. Since last month, the government has implemented the 3+4 quarantine arrangement, reducing the hotel quarantine period from 7 days to just 3. The industry pointed out that the occupancy rate for quarantine hotels has since dropped from more than 70% per day to the current 50%. But as infected guests will have to cover their own hotel expenses under the new arrangement, the hotel sector expects only half of the infected will choose to complete their isolation in hotels. A spokesperson for the Federation of Hong Kong Hotel Owners said hotel operators would check on the status of infected guests, and those with serious symptoms would be sent to the hospital. She added the government should give clearer guidelines on the handling of infected hotel guests. In the past, COVID clusters were found in quarantine hotels as a result of ventilation issues, raising concerns as to whether the new measure could pose risk to others in the building. A respiratory disease specialist said risk can be reduced by separating 2 infected guests by at least 3 rooms. Another suggestion is having 2 separate hotel teams to serve infected and quarantined guests. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
With the pandemic apparently stabilizing, there are more calls to further relax the city's quarantine arrangements for inbound travelers to 7 days of home quarantine. Neighboring countries that have scrapped quarantine require travelers to install a location tracking app. IT experts say Hong Kong has the technology for a tracking app, but more support services would be needed. For more than a month now, Hong Kong has allowed 3 days of hotel quarantine and 4 days of home isolation for travellers from overseas. That's prompted the tourism and business sector to push for 7 days of home quarantine. Currently, travellers going to Singapore must be double jabbed or have one jab and present a negative test results obtained within 2 days. Once they test negative at the airport, they do not need to quarantine. Those going to Japan who have been triple jabbed are not subject to quarantine either. But for both countries, travellers are still required to download a location tracking app. Will there be concerns if Hong Kong follows suit? An IT sector representative said position tracking using mobile phones is already a mature technology and it's not hard to develop a new app. Eric Young, honorary president of the Smart City Consortium, said there were several considerations, including what happens if the server loses track of the person and following up if devices lose connection. He suggested authorities discuss with telecoms on providing internet services for inbound travellers during their surveillance period so that they can upload data to the system in real time. Meanwhile, infectious disease expert Wilson Lam believes infections have peaked during this current pandemic wave, but regular nucleic acid tests must be done in order to allow 7 days of home quarantine. President Xi Jinping arrived in Kazakhstan today, kicking off his first trip abroad since the outbreak of the pandemic. He is expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Uzbekistan tomorrow at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Xi was greeted by Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev as he landed in the country's capital, Nur-Sultan. He was then driven to the presidential office. Tokayev's government said the two leaders would discuss energy markets and the global economic turmoil. Xi is due to fly to Samarkand in Uzbekistan, where a summit of the 8-nation Shanghai Cooperation Organization will be held. The Kremlin said Putin and Xi will discuss the war in Ukraine and other international and regional topics. Xi earlier released an article on Uzbekistan media hailing the fruitful cooperation of both countries under the Belt and Road Initiative. The coffin of Queen Elizabeth II was taken to Buckingham Palace on Tuesday after leaving Edinburgh's iconic St Giles Cathedral. The coffin will be taken to Westminster Hall on a grand carriage later today as part of a grand military procession. A period of lying in state will follow until the Queen's funeral on Monday. Daniel Rowell tells us more.
The coffin of Queen Elizabeth II was carried out of Edinburgh's iconic St Giles's Cathedral on Tuesday. A bagpiper played as the flag-draped coffin left the cathedral. The coffin had lain in the cathedral for 24 hours after being brought to Edinburgh from the Queen's Balmoral estate. The monarch passed away there last Thursday at the age of 96, bringing her unprecedented 70-year reign to an end. Thousands of people had filed silently past the coffin in the cathedral to pay their respects. Crowds once more lined the Royal Mile through the historic heart of the Scottish capital to watch and applaud as the coffin, accompanied by the Queen's daughter, Princess Anne, was driven away in a hearse.
It was wonderful that she was able to come to Edinburgh because Scotland was one of our happiest places, and for her to finish her service in Scotland, I think I remember the coronation when she made her promises, and her last service was in Scotland, and I think that's wonderful.
We're happy that she left us in Scotland, her happy place. She loved to be here, and you know we're very proud of her. We're Scots. She's half Scottish, as you probably know, and you know it's a sad time for us, but you know we hope for the best for King Charles.
The Queen's coffin was taken to Edinburgh Airport, where it was flown to London on a Royal Air Force transport plane. The coffin landed at the RAF's Northolt Air Base in West London around an hour later. British Prime Minister Liz Truss and Defence Minister Ben Wallace were among leading political and military figures present there to receive it. Princess Anne and her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, who had travelled on the plane from Edinburgh, joined the delegation. Pallbearers brought the coffin to a waiting hearse where it was taken to Buckingham Palace as King Charles and other royal family members waited inside. Tens of thousands of people lined the streets in heavy rain to mark the coffin's arrival in the British capital on Tuesday night. The coffin is being taken to Westminster Hall on a grand carriage today as part of a grand military procession. A period of lying in state will begin today until the Queen's funeral on Monday. Members of the public will be allowed to walk past the coffin until the morning of the funeral. The funeral will be attended by dozens of world leaders. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
King Charles III visited Northern Ireland on Tuesday as part of his first tour of the UK's 4 constituent countries as monarch. King Charles and his wife Camilla, Queen Consort, attended a service of reflection for the life of Queen Elizabeth II at Belfast's St Anne's Cathedral. They also visited Hillsborough Castle, the royal family's official residence in Northern Ireland. Speaking to an audience at the castle, the king said he would draw on his late mother's shining example and seek the welfare of all the inhabitants of Northern Ireland. The event was attended by the leaders of all of Northern Ireland's main political parties, including Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin is a nationalist party that wants Northern Ireland to leave the United Kingdom and become part of the Republic of Ireland. There are mixed views on the British monarchy in Northern Ireland. Protestant Unionists consider themselves British, and Roman Catholic nationalists see themselves as Irish. The political and religious divisions sparked 3 decades of violence known as the Troubles. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index plunged 2.5% today. It tracked regional losses after Wall Street fell the most since June 2020. This came as a report showed inflation has kept a surprisingly strong grip on the U.S. economy. On Tuesday, the U.S. government said inflation ticked up 0.1% from July to August and 8.3% from a year ago. That was down from June's 4-decade high of 9.1%, but excluding the volatile categories of food and energy, so-called core prices jumped by an unexpectedly sharp 0.6% from July to August. The Federal Reserve monitors core prices closely, and the latest figures heightened fears of an even more aggressive Fed and sent stocks plunging, with the Dow Jones collapsing more than 1,200 points. Still, President Joe Biden was quick to allay fears.
The stock market doesn't necessarily reflect the state of the economy, as you well know. And the economy is still strong, unemployment's low, jobs are up, manufacturing's good. So I think we're going to be fine.
Are you worried about the inflation number, though, sir?
No, I'm not, because we're talking about 0.1% of 1%, and anyway.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Ukrainian troops keep up pressure on fleeing Russian forces in the Kharkiv region. In Massachusetts, a package explodes on the campus of Northeastern University, leaving 1 injured. And locally, the closing down of a chain of luxury cake shops. Welcome back to TVB News. Ukrainian troops continue their surge into Russian-occupied territories in a stunning counteroffensive in which large swathes of land has been retaken. U.S. President Joe Biden, however, said there is still a long way to go. Ukraine, meanwhile, said it had shot down an Iranian-made drone. Nazvi Karim has more.
Dozens of abandoned military vehicles said to be left behind by Russian soldiers who fled in a hurry from this town in the Kharkiv region. They were running like mice, said this Ukrainian soldier. They were running and abandoning everything, vehicles, their own men. They even shot one of their own who was wounded just to get away. These are among several dozen towns and villages Ukraine says it has liberated in their major counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying around 8,000 square kilometers of territory has been retaken from Russia so far this month. For Ukraine and its allies, it is a source of hope, with Zelensky aiming to recapture all lands taken by Russian troops since the start of their invasion in February, as well as the Crimea, which was annexed in 2014. U.S. President Joe Biden was asked if this was a turning point in the war.
The question is unanswerable right now. It's hard to tell. It's clear the Ukrainians have made significant progress. I think it's going to be a long haul.
In the liberated villages, such as this one in the Rakovi region, Ukraine officials are now starting the grim process of documenting potential Russian atrocities. This villager said there were only 30 locals remaining from more than 1,000 before the Russians came. They were killing locals, he said, shooting them. You could probably see over there were dugouts. Nobody knows yet how many are still buried there. There is nothing good here. Russia has admitted to withdrawing troops from large areas in the northeast, insisting it is a strategic move. US and British intelligence say the Russian armed forces are also resorting to weapons imported from Iran and possibly North Korea. Ukraine's defense ministry said on Tuesday it had shot down this drone, suspected to be Iranian-made. Tehran has denied supplying weapons to Russia. The United Nations, meanwhile, says food exports from Ukraine and Russia have increased since grain ships started sailing out of Black Sea ports on July 22nd. But Russian fertilizer exports are still down, raising fears of a food crisis.
Fertilizers are important for the world to have enough food in the next harvest. We are going into the sowing season in the northern hemisphere. If we cannot solve this problem, that is an urgent problem that will affect and bring, a food crisis in the future.
Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
A group of St Petersburg local politicians are likely to lose their district council after they called for Russian President Vladimir Putin to be sacked over the Ukraine war. One of its deputies said a judge's ruling on Tuesday deemed previous council meetings invalid, paving the way for it to be broken up. Another member said the same court fined him around $780 for discrediting the authorities by calling for Putin's removal. 4 more members of the local council are due to appear in court. Last week, some members appealed to the State Duma to bring charges of treason against Putin. Germany will step up lending to energy firms at risk of being crushed by soaring gas prices. The German Finance Ministry says it wants to boost state loans for energy firms tapping into the COVID-19 pandemic relief fund. The German cabinet is expected to approve draft legislation today. The loan guarantees could amount to 67 billion euros. Meanwhile, the European Commission will also announce targets later today to cut electricity consumption and impose a revenue cap for non-gas powered plants. The EU now faces an energy crisis following Russia's invasion of Ukraine that sees Moscow cut its energy supplies amid Western sanctions. Separately, lights on the Eiffel Tower in Paris will soon be turned off more than an hour earlier than usual at night to save electricity. Starting September 23rd, lights at other landmarks, such as St George's Tower and City Hall, will be turned off at 10 p.m. Armenia and Azerbaijan have accused each other of launching new rounds of shelling this morning. This after fighting on the border between the two nations erupted on Tuesday. Both sides have lost about 50 troops since then. Armenia's defense ministry accused Azerbaijani forces of launching combat drones in the direction of the Armenian resort of Shurmuk overnight. That's in addition to renewing shelling from artillery and mortars this morning in the direction of the resort. The Azerbaijani military hit back, accusing Armenian forces of shelling its positions in 2 districts in the separatist Nagorno-Karabakh region. The two countries have been embroiled in a decades-old conflict over the area. The office of the UN Secretary-General called for immediate steps to be taken to de-escalate tensions.
The Secretary-General is deeply concerned about reports of renewed fighting along the Armenia-Azerbaijani border. He calls on the sides to take immediate steps to de-escalate tensions, exercise maximum restraint, and resolve any outstanding issues through dialogue within existing formats. He also urges them to fully implement previously reached agreements. The Secretary-General expresses his support for the ongoing mediation efforts in the region.
A 45-year-old employee of Northeastern University in Boston was injured when a package delivered to the school exploded as he was handling it. The police said a second package was found and deemed safe, but did not reveal how the packages were delivered to the campus. The injured person was taken to a hospital for treatment. Authorities are investigating the incident, which led to the cancellation of evening classes in 6 buildings. The police have urged students and staff at other Boston area campuses, including Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to remain cautious and report any suspicious packages. Typhoon Muifa is set to make landfall in Zhejiang province this evening. The China Meteorological Administration said as Muifa moves towards the waters east of Zhejiang, it will cross Hangzhou Bay before making its way to Shanghai tonight. Meanwhile, residents gathered near Qiantang River to watch the annual Qiantang tidal ball. The tidal waves move at high speeds. Some visitors were even knocked off their feet. With Muifa due to arrive at the Zhejiang coast, authorities predict tidal waves reaching 6 meters high will appear off the shores of the province and Shanghai. The region is also expected to face harsh thunderstorms. Over half of the flights have been cancelled at Shanghai's Pudong and Hongqiao international airports, affecting nearly 600 flights. Crostini, a local chain of luxury cake shops, has shut down all its stores. A labor union says some part-time workers have yet to receive their salaries for August. The news came from Crostini's Facebook page, saying about 10 shops around town have been closed. The cake shop said it had been unable to turn things around since 2020, when the business environment worsened. But the post drew angry responses online, particularly from those who had bought prepaid vouchers from the shop. The Eating Establishment Employees General Union said 100 workers from the cake shop chain have sought help for overdue payments. The Consumer Council noted voucher holders who paid with credit card and still have their receipts can try to get a refund. That's the news. Thanks for watching.